Something slightly different today. I'm going to do a little overview of my golf swing. I had a few requests for it over the weeks and months on YouTube. So for the purposes of your interests, I've hit myself a little 7-iron, and I'll be using Sportsbox to give me and you a little bit of an insight into what I like to work on, how I like to see the golf swing, and apply a lot of the points that I talk about in my videos on my channel. As you can see on the screen here, on the right hand side we've got the avatar of me, and on the left hand side all of the data that is taken from Sportsbox and the swing on the left hand side. Sportsbox allows me to do lots of different things. On the right hand side you can see I can take a full view of my golf swing from many various different locations. Now the amount of data that Sportsbox allows itself to acquire is exceptional, and the opportunity of AI and 3D modeling has really moved forwards over the past weeks, months, years. I can split the screen down so I can just see myself here making a swing as my full avatar, and I'm going to draw up various different data points as we go, so I think you'll find it really quite interesting. And there's the swing as you would normally see it from a face-on perspective. The camera angle from being face-on gives a lot more of the data points that we are looking for. There's a few that it misses out because it's from face-on and not down the line, but maybe I'll do a separate video on that at a later stage. So going back to the 3D, and I'm just going to split the two up here, zoom back in and take us all the way back to the start. Now, for those of you that have watched enough of my content, maybe you've appreciated that from a down the line perspective, I'm always looking for the ratio of the spine angle to the club shaft as close to 90 degrees as possible. Obviously I can't draw those angles on the left hand side, and Sportsbox doesn't actually allow me to draw on the avatar itself, but if you can appreciate the angle of the spine relative to the club shaft at 90 is my desire. If I then come back to the start, what we're also looking for when I draw up a couple of the lines here, I'm going to draw a vertical line down through my chest and then down through my pelvis. And what we should see is a lower half that's slightly forwards of the mid to top of the spine. The yellow line is the pelvis, the blue line is the middle of the chest. And as we start to make a swing here, as I've talked so often in my videos, I always like to see a force out in this direction as we start to make our backswing. And even though that force is moving down and towards the ground here, we can see that my pelvis has actually stayed pretty darn stable. It's really an adversary to the energy that the golf club is having on me on the way back. So that energy in the handle moving away from the target and the force going down in the leg, those two forces are really opposing each other. Nevertheless, as you can see on the right hand side, my chest is moving back behind the golf ball, and it's really at this stage here where you really start to see how my right hip is starting to tuck back inside itself. And I do have a decent amount of, let's take those lines away there, I do have a decent amount of spine tipped away from the target, which is my preference, what we should see. A lot of data suggests that backs go into extension at the top of the backswing, somewhere between 5 and 9 degrees of back extension. Not a preference to me. I like to see as much chest down as possible, and if I can, I like to try to match up the angle that my spine is at the start here with as much as I can at the top, so that we don't see, or I don't see, too much difference between the two. As we then start to move down, and I think this is the part where a lot of golfers have spoken so much of me pushing off my left leg rather than pushing off my right leg. I absolutely try to put as much energy into my left leg and my left ball of my foot as I'm moving back. So from the midway point here, when my left arm is parallel to the floor, I'm really starting to load into that left toe, the left ball of the foot, because it's so important that it's going to give me some force that is going to oppose the direction the handle really is going to move in on the way down. So this handle, where it gets pulled in this direction on the way down, really is something that I am trying to fight as a golfer as much as possible. So as I start to move the golf club down, this left hip is really starting or trying to push against that pull force of the handle. Now it's important to understand that when we start to look on the right hand side here, as I'm pulling the handle down that arrow and down that line there, just look at the yellow line that's in my pelvis. Can you see how that is still absolutely moving towards the target? It's not like I'm actually trying to stop my pelvis moving towards the target. It's just opposing the force of the pull, because the pull is really, really extreme here. And so I'm just trying to offset that with my lower half. And it's really that pull direction that I've talked extensively about, pulling at this point here, pulling the handle towards the ball line as much as I can. And as I'm doing that, that left leg, so as I'm pulling towards that ball line here, the left leg is really fighting against that. The left leg is really trying to put energy back in this direction relative to the energy forwards of the handle in this direction. And because of that, if you look at the change in gap between the blue vertical line and the yellow vertical line, can you see that the gap actually gets a little bit greater here? It does slightly reduce here, which is understandable. So I could do with a little bit more pushback with my left leg. But actually, when it comes to postural angles down through strike, you can see the yellow line and the blue line have stayed pretty darn consistent as I start to pull up and through the golf swing here. And there's a very different look. You know, we've seen at great lengths, let me just get rid of these lines here. These at great length, when we've looked at golfers, we've seen backs going into extension at this point here. So we've seen how we've encouraged leg drive and we've encouraged the spine going into extension. For me, I'm not a fan of that. I don't believe that that should be something that is so prominent in a golfer's swing, purely because as we start to move through the golf shot, if that left hip is tucking under and I've got enough energy with my chest moving forwards, I don't really want to see a lot of back extension. And we see it if you're watching Bryson Dechambeau this weekend, one of the, well, probably arguably the most powerful golfer on tour. You really get to see how his upper body is really chasing through strike here. You really see how we get this tuck under of the left hip and a chase forwards of the top half. And it's something that, again, I've talked about when the left shoulder at this point in the through swing is really, I'm really starting to try and make that left shoulder move down. I'm not trying to elevate it upwards, because I've got enough going on down through my feet and through my pelvis and the direction the handle is pulling in to enable me to keep these side bend angles. I've never actively tried to push my body into side bend. I've just worked on how my feet are working through the pelvis and through the spine. And so we get to see, particularly from this down the line view, how that pull forwards with the handle, yes, it's moving down. I absolutely don't doubt that. But and it's always going to have more energy going down than is going out, but I'm just opposing that direction, because the more I oppose the direction of down and push it outwards, it actually gives me an opportunity in the downswing to use that left leg to move that left hip back on itself. And at that point, we then start to see how my right arm can really start to track across my shoulder pitch here. So these are just some of the ingredients that I really focus on within my golf swing. And I want to go back here now and just talk about some hip levels. And I'm just going to draw up a couple of lines here through the pelvis and through the shoulders here. Now let me just take that away there. If we now just take a little look at this pelvis and shoulder orientation, this left shoulder higher, can you see before I've even got the golf club going, my left shoulder is higher. So why on earth would I want to accentuate that sensation through strike? It'll only make you worse. And so knowing that the pelvis, just take a little look at the pelvis line here, knowing that the pelvis is tipped towards the ball in an anterior fashion, as we move around, because of the angle of that pelvis, your left hip will always drop below your right hip. But my sensation is that when I push off with my right leg away from the target, or towards the target, should I say, I'm actually feeling that my left hip is more elevated. It would never be elevated, but it's certainly a sensation that I'm trying to create in my backswing, because what that allowed me to do is to create more forward bend in my backswing too, and help me create that forward bend with my spine at the top of the backswing. Yet I truly know that my left hip will always be low in my backswing because the angle that it started on. I know that might sound a little bit complex, but go back over a few times and watch that back, because that's a really important point to start to orchestrate how your spine and your shoulder pitch starts to work out. Then as we start to move back down, how we start to unravel, I'm a strong, firm believer that everything should be open at strike. Just look at how much my chest is open, how much my shoulders are open down through strike here. I'm trying to encourage that as much as possible. I am someone that is not trying to encourage left shoulder up. I'm very much trying to encourage left shoulder down, but because of the forces I'm putting on through the handle and through the feet, I'm really able to keep those spine angles and those pelvis angles, because of how I'm using my feet, how I'm using my middle, and where I'm directing the handle. So I don't have a funky swing in any way, shape or form. All of the stuff that I talk about on my channel is here to be seen, but I have a few people that potentially are conflicted in what I say, what I feel, and what you see. But it's certainly all of these movements, what I see and everything that I portray on my channel is what I do in my golf swing. So this is just one of maybe a few videos that I'm going to do. I'll start to get into maybe more angles of hip rotation and chest rotation, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what I do in my golf swing, some thoughts, some different imagery with the aid of Sportsbox. Thanks so much for watching. Consider subscribing while you are here, and I think you'll find, my friends, that is good coaching.